Yes, I would like to welcome you now to the second panel of our convention. No, we are still not starting, no? Okay, now the promo video will play and after that we will start. Hello and welcome to the second panel of our event called Movement Research and Dance Archives, the panel in the frame of the 5th Choreographic Convention in Sofia in the frame of Anti-Static Festival. My name is Angelina Georgieva. I work in the field of performing arts studies, criticism and journalism. I'm part of the curatorial team of this event and I will be moderating now this panel. Hello also to our panelists who are joining us online from Bucharest, Ljubljana and Venice. After this interesting first panel that we had on movement research in the artistic practice, which actually totally broadened the conversation on movement in dance and on what we can understand now by movement research, the topic that we want to raise in this second panel is how movement is present in cultural memory, how it is transmitted in performance practice, and of what relevance is here movement research as a creative tool. Archival turn, archive fever, will to archive. All these terms have been used to describe the distinctive engagements of contemporary choreographers with historical dance works at least since 2000s. Reconstructions, reenactments, and reinterpretations of dance pieces, mainly of the 20th century, employed various performative approaches to archival materials. This paralleled a re-examination of that period in dance historiographical researches. It also highlighted the significance of dance archives as institutions which conserve and preserve documents, but also as laboratories of memory as well as of new work. Skeptical considerations about the possibilities of documenting performance and especially movement have prevailed in dance theory for a long time. The fixed character of the material remains of performances contradicted their ephemeral and transitory nature. But in the last decades, a more complex view of documents of artworks has evolved that investigates them as artifacts in themselves. Documents translate and transform performances in different materialities, in different media, which participate on their own right in construction of the memory of them. Therefore, the history of documenting performances and the specificity of a particular document gains a greater importance. What constitutes documents of movement? What documentation of movement practices prevail in dance archives? To what extent can dance history writing rely on them as a source? What is the potential of reappropriating and recontextualizing of historical material in current performance practices? And again, what relevance gains movement research here? These are some of the questions that we're going to tackle with our panelists now. Let me present them to you. We have Corina Cimpoieru from Romania. Corina has a background in cultural anthropology and currently she works at the Research and Documentation Department at the National Center for Dance in Bucharest. In the last years, she dedicated her time into researching for lost or unknown dance archives in Romania, both private and institutional. Her activities also include curating and co-curating dance history projects and exhibitions. Hi, Corina.
Hello.
Hi. From Ljubljana with us is Rok Vevar. He's dance historian and archivist, as well as a publicist in the field of contemporary performing arts. Rok has collaborated as dramaturg with dance artists and theater makers. He has been teaching theater criticism as well as history, dramaturgy, analysis, and theory of contemporary dance at the Academy of Theater, Film and Television in Ljubljana. He is one of the driving forces of the Balkan Network for Dance, Noma Dance Academy. Recently, he has published a monograph on the Slovenian dance artist Ksenije Hribar, for which he has been awarded the Ksenije Hribar Award. Congratulations, Rok. And we are also joined by Sasha Acentic. He is a choreographer, performance maker, and cultural activist from Serbia, based in Germany. Sasha works in the field of contemporary dance, performance, and disability arts, and since 2007, his work has been presented internationally. He's joining us now from Venice, where he's working on a piece with Xavier Leroy for the Venice Biennale. Is that right, Sasha?
Yes, hello. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hi. You will tell us a little bit more, perhaps, about it later on. So welcome to all of you. With us was supposed to be also dance theater and scholar Isa Wortelkamp from Germany. Eventually that became not possible. But we will see one short pre-recorded video talk with her. Isa Wortelkamp's research focus are translations of movement into texts, images and writings. She has written a number of publications in which she traces the significance of these translations with regard to performance analysis and theater studies, as well as on historiographical reflection on documents of movement. Let's see now the interview which I did with her as a kind of introduction to the problematics of our panel. After that, each of the panelists will have a short presentation and we will open the discussion. So can we play please now the video? So in the past years, your research has been focused on different kinds of documents of movement, mainly photography and text, and how they should be approached as a source for dance history as well as for performance analysis. In this regard, you are advocating a media-specific approach that doesn't stop with analyzing the characteristics of the represented movement, but investigates documents as scenes of transformations and media transfers between movement and image or text. What new perspective does this approach offer?
So, first of all, I have to admit that when I first came into contact with historical documents of dance, I was less attracted by the content like the represented movement, dancers, or poses, but by the material itself. I remember that I was sitting in the attic of an archive nearby Cologne. It's called Theaterwissenschaftliche Sammlung in Bahn. When I did my research about dance treatises from the 18th century. And while I was reading, I focused on the material on the paper. I felt the weight of the book and was listening to the sound when I was turning the pages. The same happened to me when, as a student, we tried to reconstruct the movement of the photographs of Nijinsky's Václav, L'après-midi d'un faune, and I was fascinated by the act of media transmission and the interrelation of image and movement. And this might seem like a lack of attention or ignorance towards the dance itself, but instead I would say the context of appearance, the aesthetic and the materiality of the document always influences our understanding of dance. So we can't look at a photograph without seeing the medium. It isn't just a window to the past. Or as the photo historian Stefan Siegel says, a knowledge through pictures can't be obtained without a knowledge about those pictures. And here lies the potential, you asked me, of my media and material-oriented approach. That is to say, to generate knowledge about the documents themselves, not only to perceive them as a document of something else, but as something special in its own rights and qualities and in its own history. To connect those knowledge about dance and about the document, this is, I think, very important and a big potential for historiography.
And movement research as practice-oriented considers dancers as archive of kinetic knowledge and works with their individual movement memory. But what knowledge of movement can be gained on the basis of archival documents, if we continue further?
Yeah, talking about body as archive or body as document, as it happened in the recent years, the so-called archival turn in the arts and humanities, should, from my point of view, focus on the process and the act of archiving and documenting movement. The way how the body archives and documents movement always tells us something about the way dance deals with its own history. Dance is reading and writing its own history while transmitting and transforming movement in every performance. The gain or chance you ask for is not only what knowledge the dancer's body offers, but how knowledge is generated through the bodily action. And this means to perceive a body, as I do it with other documents, in its own history. The specific form and context bodies appear, the experience, the technical and social background they have, their abilities and disabilities, and so on. I hope this was the question, otherwise just asked again.
Yeah, this is related actually to my third questions about the it's not that already that new wave of reenactments in contemporary choreography. Indeed, in recent decades, a lot of contemporary choreographers' work has been turned to, I quote, tracks and steps and bodies and gestures and sweat and images and words and sounds performed by the dancers, as Andrea Lepecki very expressively described. And historical documents of dance have been a major reference for extracting and generating movement material. What, according to you, is the result of this occupation on the side of contemporary dance practitioners with the past? And where do you find the interesting and provoking artistic approaches towards historical documents of movement?
Thank you. Again, I would say it's worth to look how dance deals with all these different historical documents. Every turning and returning to its own history in contemporary dance emplaces a certain perspective on historical documents. It implies different procedures and methods. I would say it's a dancery historiography. And trying to understand all those different approaches offers for me always new historiographical approaches. Mm-hmm. For example, the Dresden dancer and choreographer Anna Till, I don't know if you know her, in parallel situation, she worked together with a photographer, Barbara Lubich, and staged historical photography as a result of a choreographic and photographic interaction. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is one example how dance can deal with documents or show us an understanding of historical documents. In this case, it's dance photography is always a dialogue of a choreographer and a photographer. So, and from my point of view, this was staged in this performance. And or Jérôme Bell showed us with Isidore Duncan how dance history is constructed or reconstructed through the context of its appearance. Mm-hmm. Through our expectations and experiences and our attributions. Through performances like this, we are invited to take a closer look on historiography. We can ask, or we are invited to ask, who tells the story? Who writes history? What enables us to believe or not to believe what we see? What does, for example, an autobiography, like in Isidore Duncan, can tell us about a dancer's life? How do we deal with historical documents? And I think those questions inspires me as a scholar to reflect how history is constructed, and even to comprehend my own work as a performative work. So how do I stage documents within my texts or in my speech, in my lectures? So, and I think this is a very important connection between art and science.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the inspiring
Thank you. You're welcome.
Input.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now to our online participants, I just need to have one organizational question. Sasha, I know that you have some time restrictions. You can be with us till 2:30 your time, is that right?
Yes, how we agreed previously.
Okay, so in that, therefore, I think that we can do a little bit of rearrangement of our previous arrangement, and perhaps we can start with you, if you don't mind, and then we can continue with Corina and Rok, so we can have time for your presentation. And I think that it is also very nice continuation to what Isa Wortelkamp was speaking in the last part of her talk. Do you mind, all of you, do you mind if we can do it like that? Because there was a little bit rescheduling in our program, and Sasha can stay with us only till 2:30. Corina and Rok, do you mind if we can do it like that? If you can start with him? It's okay for you? Okay. So,
I also
hmm?
I also just hope that then we will have some time also to talk together.
Let's
after.
hope. It depends on us, so we can be really keep the time frame. So, Sasha, when we were conceiving the panel, we got very interested on some of your recent performances. One is Dis Sylphide from 2018, I believe, in which performers with and without learning disabilities restage and discuss fragments of three key choreographic works of the 20th century. These are Witch Dance by Mary Wigman, Kontakthof by Pina Bausch, and Self Unfinished by Xavier Leroy. And the other one is Dance in the DDR, Was bleibt, or Dance in the GDR, What Remains, with a question mark, from 2019, where you are reactualizing dance pieces from former East Germany, which have been now more or less forgotten. These works seem to be related to one of the already mentioned questions: who writes history? And moreover, what bodies and notions on movement enter the historical dance canon? What remains excluded from it? Could you please tell us a little bit more about these productions? How did you approach the historical material that you worked with, and what aspects of movement research were important for you in your work?
Yes. I mean, first hearing the Isa talking with you, somehow I think before I talk about these two performances and research works, I would like to say that for me it's also important that we, in working with archive materials and with historical archives, that it is important to approach them already in a critical way, how they are made, who owns them and who has access to them, because it is not for an artist. There are many obstacles and restrictions when we want to use or access some of the, let's say in Germany, dance archives in Leipzig, or at the Akademie der Künste in Berlin, or in Cologne, or in other places, which I think on its own is a big topic also to discuss. For me, in that regard, it is important to say that then for my artistic and research work, analysis of the past and critical examination of how the history of dance is written are very important aspects. And in that way, somehow in my work, artistic, but also as a cultural worker, I strongly believe that it is the present that is to be changed and revolutionized as a legacy for the future. And in that sense, Walter Benjamin's concept of history is something that is very important for my work. Reenactment that we also discussed in preparation for this talk, and also the title of this panel includes this term. For me, I understand it in my work as an act of resistance against the cultural indoctrination and oppression by reactualizing works, concepts, practices, or events from the past that were or that are still overlooked, forgotten, marginalized, or erased from dance and from dance history. So saying this as a little introduction, I think it's important to understand these two performances that you mentioned. because from that position I started to work on these performances together with my colleagues. In Tanz in DDR was bleibt, we started with this question, what happened with the dance from the former German Democratic Republic after the reunification of Germany's. And in that sense, I was interested to understand why there are no choreographers' works and practices that we could see as a practice that has continuation and that is still present within the actual contemporary dance scene in Germany, that would come from the dance scene and cultural context from the former GDR. In that research, then we did work on archive materials, but also we worked on and with choreographers who do come from that context, but are not anymore part of the contemporary dance scene in Germany, but they make their work in some other fields of or cultural spheres, and also with choreographers who have indirect link or influence by some of the practices and concepts from the GDR, but are not direct disciples, how to say, of any of these schools or practices from the GDR. So we had very different approaches to the references that we used for the performance. And at the end of the research and in the performance, we have several different choreographers and their works that we then reenacted in the performance as a response to this question, was bleibt, or what remains of this dance from the GDR. And those choreographers that we focus on are Arila Ziegert, Jo Fabian, Fine Kwiatkowski, Patricio Bunster, Jean Beit, and Marianne Vogelsang. For me, as someone who initiated the whole work and I artistically directed it together with my colleague Alexander Ashur, and we worked with a big team of collaborators from Germany, both from former East and West Germany, but also with colleagues from Serbia and from Chile, that also are linked to historically because of different links to the scene from the GDR, but also with the current collaborations that I also developed through my artistic work. We then focused on those choreographers that I just mentioned, because for me it was important to bring the work and the ideas of choreographers from Germany that ceased to exist, but choreographers who believed in new critical dance, a dance that reflects on its time, not in a dogmatic way, but in a brave, uncorrupted and experimental way. And we looked from the 1946 until 1993, and we then observed the different periods and in which those choreographers that I mentioned worked and developed their artistically, as I mentioned, we had a different approach to these references. I can maybe speak later a bit more concrete about them, because each of them, as I said, was different, so we would need much more time to explain that. But next to the approach to these materials, for me, it was very important that we also look for a different language to talk about them in the performance, but also in the making of the performance, but especially to find it for the performance, because the language of dance history and dance theory that we use today, or in the last 30 years, starting from this moment of the reunification, is the language of that belongs to the Western dance paradigm, and in big part takes a role in the problem of what happened with the dance from the former East Germany. So in that sense, for me, it was important to look also for a different language to talk about this, and the language that we use and that we developed in the performance is language that belongs more to the language of riddles and poetry, in order to be able to also deal with the part in our memory that for most of the current audiences of contemporary dance in Germany has no place. These practices, they don't exist. They are not present neither in their knowledge nor in their experience, and also in a big part of colleagues and actors of dance scene. Oh, this now reminds me that 10 minutes is over. It goes very fast. And I was still didn't say about this feed, and I wanted to show also some video excerpts. So maybe this now reminds me maybe to that the time is up. So maybe I can bring later a bit more, and maybe hopefully in the conversation.
Please also bring in the still feed, because I think also it's very important.
And for this still feed performance, it is a performance that I created together with my colleagues with learning disabilities. We as a group in Novi Sad in Serbia, we work since 1999, so like over more than 20 years now. We work together, and with this performance, our idea was to think of the performance as an intervention within the actual contemporary dance scene, and to do it from the position and together with my colleagues with learning disabilities, approaching these three works that are like iconic works from the dance history in Germany. As you mentioned, Hexentanz by Mary Wigman from 1916, and later the version from in the 20s. Then Kontakthof by Pina Bausch from 1978, and Self and Finish by Xavier Leroy from 1998. And in this work, we took these works because of the idea or belief that the original concepts of these works still have political potential when we talk about the place of disabled artists in dance, but also the representation of disability today, and also historically, if we look through the 20th century. And then by appropriating these works and reactualizing some of the potentials of the original concepts of these works by artists with learning disabilities, we thought of this work as an intervention within the actual dance scene, but also as a way to inscribe today our, and concretely position of our colleagues with learning disabilities already in the something that we see will become a past of a future that we believe in, which is that artists with learning disabilities and artists with disabilities should be part of dance and dance history. Yeah, so maybe I prepared like also 2 trailers of these 2 works. Trailers, they cannot tell much, as we know, also videos, and also we are now in the online environment, so I don't know if this would
can you
now
please show
be
from
something to
this
take time.
Sylphide, if you can show 1 2 minutes?
I can. Let's try.
Through share screen here. You can share the screen.
I share the screen, right? It's like this, right? Share.
And you have to tick optimize Google. Oh, it seems the connection is not well.
I don't know if it worked.
You can you send the link in the
I
chat?
can check. Yeah.
Can you send the link in the chat so we can
Yes.
play it from here
Yes, thank you.
to everybody? Send all this option. I think that it is important for us to see it because I think that especially the scene with the witch dance is very much is telling a lot about your approach actually to movement and in what way reenacting movement functions here. It's done. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really wanted us to see this video because what I find very interesting here in the Sylphide is that on one hand, restaging fragments of these canonic pieces of 20th century is kind of a gesture of claiming a place in dance history of bodies that were not visible in it, but there is not only the attempt to restage them kinetically. What I found very interesting is that actually you give space to their own visions, to the visions of the performers themselves on the meaning and experience of the movement material in these choreographies. So they really appropriate them. They became in a way also quite personal. And this is especially in the scene which dance, it's like the movement material functions on one level, but the expressiveness, the presence that the performer brings in functions on a quite different level, and this discrepancy was very interesting for me. And in that sense, could you please elaborate a little bit more? did you work with something that we can call movement research, and with what aspects
Yes.
of it was it important for you?
Of course, if we talk only about hexentons, Natalia Vladisavljevic, my colleague, she is author and choreographer and performer with Down syndrome. She is the one who reenacted this part, but also she wrote her own version of hexentons. And we started to work exactly on the movement and thinking of a choreography with Natalia, with her interpretation of it, without also dealing with the original or with the reference of Mary Wigman's hexentons. Because as someone who initiated the project, knowing Natalia Vladisavljevic's way of writing, where she also appropriates titles of well-known performances or books or movies, and only starting with the title, she writes a new version of this piece of art or work. And this is the approach that I suggested to her also in relation to hexentons, without even dealing with any archive materials that exist in the like dance archives or in relation to the heritage of Mary Wigman and so on. And in that sense, we started with the movement research only then based on what Natalia Vladisavljevic wrote as a text proposing what kind of body is on stage under the title hexentons, what kind of choreography, who takes part in it, and how it is performed. All of this is a written text that also is read in this part of the performance, because Natalia, as I said, she's an author also, and next to this, what she also calls a libretto for hexentons, she also wrote a poem that also describes the state of being and who is this witch that is dancing on stage. Also, she wrote something that she calls a choreography of scream, which is a score for the sound and music that accompanies this dance. And then we, as a group of artists with and without learning disabilities, we then went into the movement research, but also choreographic work. And then only after this, I also shared with Natalia the short video that we can find on YouTube about original Wigman's work, which is only 2 minutes, 10 seconds or something like this. And then Olivera Kovačević-Crnjanski, my colleague, together with Natalia, was analyzing this video, and then also they were trying to reconstruct this part of the choreography. And then Natalia, together with Olivera, created the rest of the choreography, and then completed it with all of this, what I was previously saying, with her proposal, how this new version or reconstruction and new interpretation of hexentons should be today. And it is performed by her as a solo, and all of us are performing the choreography of Scream that supports her dance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sasha, because it seems really that you will not be able to stay with us for the other talks.
I'll try maybe to stay at least 10 minutes, and then I'll let my colleagues know that I'll join the rehearsal a bit late.
Yeah, I understand. But I would like to invite Rok and Corina. Do you like to respond to what Sasha was talking till now? Because if you want to enter in a discussion with him, because he will not be till the end with us. If you want to respond to something.
Well, besides everything that Sasha said, I find a very interesting proposal or idea that one has to find for a certain kind of historicizational process a certain kind of particular language. I like the idea with the riddles and poetry that are kind of included in the process of restaging or basically dealing with the historical material, because I identify with that, because in, for example, my latest book, I found that a certain kind of language has to be invented in the or a certain kind of also narratological approaches for particular documents, but also when one is confronted with their limits, I think. This is something for me.
We will talk about this with you a little bit later on, yes. Corina, if you want to respond to what
Yes, I was just reflecting on this, looking at history from the point of filling in the gaps, and that actually when you want to take into consideration the absences in the archive, and this also it's a limit of the document, but also gives you space for the new language to emerge and to translate into another way of dealing with the missing document or fact about the dance. And I think it's also what moves me in the last year is this paradigm that Sasha talked in the Western, that the dances have their own archive with a view of the West, and I will elaborate more in my presentation on this issue. I mean, I find it really important. It's also about the life of the dance archives, and because they're not all available, I mean, 24 of them, and there are also issues of availability of these dance archives for the eastern part work that we are doing here.
Sasha, do you want to answer to something? No? Okay. Yes, I totally. Sasha, do you want or no? Because I.
No, not to take time. I think it's important that also we proceed with the plan, and then we see if there is. Thank you.
Thank you. Corina, you really raised quite important questions, and let's indeed continue with you. And in our pre-talk, we were discussing this dual existence of documents being facts and artifacts with their facts on one hand, facts of an event, for example, but also artifacts with their specific materiality and textures. But if we have to come to the basis, from your point of view, what constitutes documents of movement in dance, and what practices of documenting movement can be traced in the archives you've been working with? So, just a broad question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Thank you for inviting me to take part into this panel. We share a lot of interest into the dance and its archiving process. I would like to say just a warm salute to people watching us, and to try to make it as live as possible as we try to make dance archives, in fact. So I'm here actually in a dance studio of the National Center for Dance that hosts the archives. And this studio is also the backstage of the main dance hall. So actually what's happening in the dance hall, it's being recorded and you see in the archives. And this is a very nice thing that also shapes the form of this archive. So I think it's making of, it's particularly related to the proximity of the scene and sharing of the space with artists and performers. So it is an archive that it reflects the activity of the National Center for Dance, and although it's interesting in the last year to try to trace all these materials about its history. So it was mainly made by the artists' interest to see and inquire what was before and what we can and cannot consider relevant for the contemporary forms of expression. So when I came to the archive, I found already these documents that about dance that were created in a reflective way. So people, the artists that engaged them with the history of dance had this sense on them. So for the last 4 years, I've been chasing for these dance traces, and here we are coming to our discussion about movement and document and this relation between them. So I've been chasing for archival sources, and I would like to say a few words about this art of chasing for dance traces, because it's that of seeking and encountering material places in different places and hidden places in either private or institutional archive, or in memories of the dance or the people that were around dance, and sometimes an institution that hold the traces but they don't know that they have because there's misplaced index or there's no such good accessibility to these traces. So I think it's very important how we relate to this practice of searching for the sources, for the archive, the sources regarding dance. And for me, it was very interesting in the last year to trace dance archives and their adventurous life, because it is precisely in what I call the adventurous life of the archive that you can trace the history of dance. And I'm talking now from my experience with the archive of Romanian dance. And in this life of the archive, you can trace details about its production, its very inception in the cultural scene, its glamorous life. It's in fascinating times at the time, restrictive political trajectories as well, hard times, abandonment, oblivion, new rediscoveries and questions of engaging with these materials. So I really do think that an archive can reflect on a society, and dancer's life can speak about all this history in general. So if we come back to these questions about movement, how can it be analyzed and perhaps explored in the document, I think we often refer to dance as being inscribed in the document, but we can consider it consider this more as a dance already contained in an archive, and that the dance has this potentiality of archiving a context. And I see here a dance as a document. So I'm trying to structure this relation between movement and document as a trajectory from movement as document, movement in the document, and the movement of the document. So if we follow this trajectory, we can follow research regarding the context of the producing of a dance. For example, I'm here in the studio and there is the scene, it's producing a new movement, and this is part of a context of the context that we are living today. So we can also take that into consideration. So what remains after is like considering movement in the document, and here we can talk about the way it is inscribed and all these tracks and domiciliation of dance. It can really be inscribed in the document, and also this raises questions about the history of documentation as a practice and the awareness of dance as an art that it was important to document, for example, in the 30s. So it's also related to technology available and how this determined the forms of the documents that in which the dance remained. And also tells you about the awareness of dance as an important art to be documented. And of course, we documented it, and then what was the life of these documents, because it traversed different regimes of interest in cultures in that performed the archival sources. Either were photographs, either were memories of former dancers, either were documents that contained I don't know, scores or different reflections on dance. So the focus was on filling in the gaps, because the history of dance archive in Romania is very gappy. There's a lot of, and I was telling before about the situation of these archives that are not ready to use. We have to continue to look for and chase for, and I'm fascinated about this adventurous life that they have actually.
Thank you, Corina. And actually, in terms of chasing documents and filling in the gaps, I think also Rok is a very good example with his private archive of Slovenian dance in his own home. But also, Rok, we can continue the conversation with you about especially exactly this problem, filling in the gaps. Actually, as a dance historian and archivist, you work with various resources and historical documents. To what extent can you rely on documentations of movements in your researches, and where do you find their limits? How do you deal with them?
Okay, I decided, because we kind of, when we were preparing this, I decided that I would like to present concrete documents, and I have chosen two examples of a kind of deficit in the research, particularly of movement documentation. Because basically, it's of course kind of history. It's a very, very gappy, and one has to realize that, for example, the Slovenian context is not the only one with these gaps. For example, recently, my new book on Ksenia Hribar was published, and I decided that first example of this kind of gappy or forgotten history is going to be from the London Contemporary Dance Theatre, namely Robert Cohen was, of course, the main pedagogue of London School of Contemporary Dance, how it was called in the late 60s. And between 1969 and 73, he introduced something in the series of performances which he claimed as a new choreographic realism. And I will try to now kind of refer to, these were 4 performances. One was called Cell in 1969. It was very, very successful, also in different tourings of the company. And the performance that was called X in 1970, people, 3 performances basically under the name, under the title of People between 72 and 73, and Mass in 1973. I would refer to X and Mass, which were initiated or basically created with the Cohen's interest in the choreographing larger groups of people and dancers. He was interested in behavioral studies of gatherings, liturgies, protests, sports games, and rituals, basically in the situations where kind of crowds of people gather. And because the thing is, with X and Mass, there are no videos or films, no notations. And while writing the book, I had to, of course, rely on photo documentation, reviews, some memoirs and testimonies. And what was for me, of course, there is one thing. Robert Cohen, American choreographer who worked with the company and was the main pedagogue of the company, he used to be, of course, soldier between the Second World War, and in 1969, some news occurred in the international press of My Lai massacre in Vietnam, and he was shocked by the fact that basically highly drugged soldiers massacred some village in Vietnam, and this basically initiated the question of people's behaviors, especially in groups. Now, I can show some documents now. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, just a moment.
I
Now
know that
for the these are the pictures from X.
We don't see the pictures. We see only your name on the screen. We see that you're trying to share, but
Yeah. Wait. Here. Allow. Now.
now, yes.
Do you see now? Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
we
I mean,
see
these
all
are
the documents.
basically photos you can see also these contact copies that I got from Victoria and Albert Museum, Blythe House Archive in London.
We see the list.
Now,
Only
the list.
Only the list.
Oh God. I don't know what. then obviously I don't know how to basically Okay, then I will just continue with the story and try to be descriptive as much as possible.
Can you just unshare the screen? Okay. And let us see you.
Oh, well. Yeah, okay. I think I'm back again.
Yes,
so
back.
Basically, okay. Now the thing was that, for example, concerning the critical responses. So basically, I collected the materials of photos, of reviews, of memoirs and testimonies, and of course, in between, with this interrogation of basically looking at the material, it was for me many things that were kind of interesting, and one of them was the basically responses of the critics that asked themselves what was that we saw. Basically, they claimed that almost nothing was there, yet everything made some kind of sense. Or basically, the materials that they saw on the stage kind of gained attention. And basically, they kind of realized that, or they admitted that they're strangling with language how to basically approach what they saw. Basically, a lot of reviews were very descriptive and less judgmental. Of course, they were puzzled. There was no explicit narrations that they were used to watch in the dance performances at the time, yet it was obvious that the materials is non-formalistic and that there were no solos, duets, or trios. What they managed to realize that there are different configurations of people in their kind of behavioral situation in front of them, and that kind of they would not name this as I would refer now to this. Basically, they realized that there is certain kind of that choreographic composition is a certain kind of social composition, yet on the 0 degree of signifying. Basically, it's non-representational. That's why they ask themselves whether it's improvised or set. Critics explicitly express their dilemmas and recognize the lack of reflective tool. And I find this kind of, these dilemmas and this struggle with language and kind of descriptive approach is very interesting, because one basically realized that there is certain kind of aesthetical or choreographic paradigm that breaks in this period with these 4, 5 basically forgotten choreographies nowadays. What was interesting also, basically, that when the group went to tour South America in between April and June 1973, this was the period of very, very dynamic political situation. It was just before some coup d'etats that happened in the next months of 1973 in South America, especially in Chile. What was interesting is that basically the audience in South America didn't have any dilemmas in reading the material in front of them. Basically, they recognized, or they projected in this kind of social compositions, basically kinetic human behavior on stage, their own reality that were at the time in South America. This is very kind of interesting kind of cultural difference between Great Britain at the time and South America. Now it's very it's a pity that I can't show you the photographs, especially for the second example. I have. I want to basically touch upon the story of one Slovenian dancer, Marta Pauline Brina, who came in the 20s and 30s out of the the disciple of Mary Wigman's school, Meta Widmer. She had her school in Ljubljana. Marta Pauline Brina was her student. And in the 1943, she entered the partisan army in Slovenia and became member of the cultural group of the 14th Division of the Yugoslav partisan army. Perhaps some of you may know her story. In the last years, because of 3 photographs that exist, where she's performing in her uniform, of course in pants and boots, in front of the large crowd of newly formed detachment of partisan army. It's in September in 1943. Basically, the soldiers of this detachment just were a few months before liberated from one concentration camp, and this detachment was formed, and she's dancing somewhere in the woods, performing in front of this large crowd of soldiers. And I mean, these are kind of very, very interesting photos. And of course, these 3 photos then, in my book, the Anthology of Slovene Dance Criticism from 1918 till 1960, I published the whole chapter devoted to Marta Pauline Brina in connection to these photos, and of course with the memories of her partisan dances. What is interesting here is that basically this short visual material of 3 photos is combined with how she remembers her kind of dance practice or dance performances in this new historical context. The revolutionary and war situation demanded, as she said, to forget everything she learned before and invent something that would suit these circumstances. She said that basically she danced in whatever the situation inside was, on uneven grounds, of course, and this was the huge balance problem as for the dancer that was trained in Ausdruck stance. She said that vast spaces demanded totally different approach to movement organization and the way basically she addresses the audience. She said at one point she claims that this Ausdruck stance and modern dance grace would be something that would be totally inappropriate and funny and ridiculous for the circumstances given. And she also said that, for example, what was new for her, that this female figure suddenly was wearing the uniform, she was in boots, and that this female figure that she also knew as a dancer before became masculinized. And she said that partisan songs helped her in kind of finding this new way of dancing for the new crowds, from the perspective of what we now these days called audience development. Is interesting, the memoirs of different people who used to watch her in this partisan context, because some of them were just basically this was the first cultural or artistic event that they witnessed in their life, and what was interesting that the response of people in accordance with the memoirs or the testimonies that we have was very, very affirmative and somehow touching.
Thank you.
So, it's
because we
it's
are already a
pity
little
that I
bit
can't-
out of time. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. No, but actually you're raising really a very important point that the documents of movement are not only the documents of executed movement by performance bodies, but also how movement was perceived by the viewers and how it functioned in this collective situation, which is really, and how to actually reconstruct and trace this is really absolute challenge. Corina, do you want to respond something to what Rock was talking about till now? Or I can move to the next question, which would be fine now.
No, I can really feel his engagement with these documents, because I have been also to this, and from the archivist, I was reflecting about who looks at the sources. I mean, because also here, I mean, everybody who looks could be a reenactor, and this shapes the form that we talk about the dance archive. So whether we had artists and reenactments, whether we had researchers and photographers, and everybody engaged with documents differently. But when you want to write a book about a dancer's life, you also deal a lot with this engagement with sources that sometimes talk, sometimes don't talk. Sometimes you have to fill in escapes, and it's a very provocative work to do. I also work on a book on a dancer's life, Iris Buddha. She's also the generation of a very big man expressionist dance. This whole process of recollecting and transmediating the stories, it's very familiar and still moves me in my research as well. So I do share.
Thank you. And I would like to, if somebody has a question here from the floor, if somebody wants to comment on something what was said, or no, sorry, no, we can continue. Roku, you wanted to say something to what Corina?
I'm sure that Corina will know, or she has this experience also, how much kind of cultural or archival diplomacy or advocating is necessary just to basically collect materials from sources, from some kind of private sources, private archives, to get donations. And I have to, for example, I'm the daughter of Marta Pauline Brina just promised me a few days ago that she is going to donate her heritage to my archive, and I'm very glad. It's sometimes very, very hard job, basically, to get the trust from people. And I'm sure this is also why I'm basically writing these books. It's partially connected to get the trust from the cultural context in which I live, so people will or are going to start to donate some very valuable pieces of materials in order then to basically be able to work.
But also, on the other hand, what we discussed in our pre-talk is this new awareness of the need of documenting also contemporary work. And I know, Corina, that you're very much involved in such processes that are going on now at the center that you're working for. Indeed, the pandemic situation with all the online streamings of archival and current productions has brought this new awareness of the need for proper documentation of performance. how do you approach it? I mean, how you mentioned that you're very interested in ways of active documentation of current pieces. How does it function? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's actually what I've been doing in the last 3 years, because I'm simultaneously archiving documents and producing documents about dance through documentations. So as the archive functions in the backstage of the dance show, it records what's happening there. And I've been part of this whole process of documentation for the last years. And when I look at the historical documents, this raised my awareness and motivated my gaze on the documents to have different gaze about the production of the documents. So that's why I call there's this awareness of documentation, that it's an active, it's a dynamic act when you document a performance, because you're not only recording, you are recording with an intentionality, with a gaze that tries to seize the active of what is happening on the stage. And yes, talking now to the current situation, this brought very hard challenges for the archive. And currently we have this program of reenactment of recent dance pieces that the National Center of Dance has produced in 2007 and 2010, and they are practically being reenacting with the new students that we have in the Dance Academy here. And I'm part of this active documentation, and this gives me the opportunity to do a kind of fieldwork research, because this documentation implies interviews with the artists, photograph, documenting all the rehearsals with photographs, with recordings, trying to gather all the materials relevant for the production of these pieces. So I actually look at this documenting as a way of redocumentation of performance that didn't have this before. And I think this is very meaningful in the times, especially that we are living now with the restrictions due to the pandemic. And we are actually going through severe restriction now in Bucharest, because the cultural institutions have been put on stop because the rising number of the COVID cases, infections. So we basically had to cancel all our shows for the end of this month. And now we are thinking about the solution to record them, but we have to make the best of it. And we also deal with the difficulties, how you can really recall the live presence and all of its meanings. So that's why this documentation is really important from different angles, an in-depth documentation of the productions.
Rok, and in Ljubljana, is it also such kind of process going on?
I mean, there are some choreographers or collectives that basically organize their processes, of course, about different ways of documentation. For example, one of these choreographers is Snježana Premuš, that is very particular and precise in the way of documenting audiovisually, also in writing, in reflections, in discussions. Her kind of long-term process, they're called physical manifestations, and basically she's also permanently reconfiguring the media, of course, in which this process could be or can be or it is presented, exhibited, and so on. She basically exhibited in as a part of my kind of archival context in Ljubljana, she had one exhibition we did together. Then, for example, Dejan Serhoj's work, one serial work, is based on the somehow considering document as concept. Basically, it's a kind of documenting of found choreography. Basically, he chooses some sites in Ljubljana, invites one spectator, and they for the 45 minutes watch the basically found space and the dynamics of different things that are going on in this space. He documents this every stage of this kind of 0 degree of choreography, and then of course with the serial of work of these works of these situations, then differences between this kind of found urban kinetic dynamic in kind of starts to be, or it turns into the documentation for some certain kind of reflection. So I think, but also there, I guess, there are many different proposals how documents or archiving could be or it is included in practices of basically choreographers that work. And I guess some of them are just an internal kind of thing or tool, procedural tool. The other ones, choreographers themselves find interesting to expose or do something. Basically kind of visual work or gallery, basically situation that they want to expose.
Yes, thank you. Last invitation for questions or comments. Do we have online some questions? Willy has a question. Please, you can take the mic.
Hello. It's not a question, I'm just curious, because if this COVID continue for the next 5 or 10 years, what you, the researcher, gonna document? I mean, of course you have much more material, but if you stop to have what to documentate, can you make can you documentate the future or fictional documentation? In this sense, like fictional or future documentation. I mean, I understand very much how important it is to documentate the past, but I'm a little bit afraid from the situation that it's possible to stop to have live art in the next 5 years or 10 years. Like, how are we gonna deal with this? Like, I mean, I don't expect really like an answer, but like, what do you think about this kind of issue? Thank you.
If researcher will become jobless? No, not that is bad, no way.
Yeah, I think it's not about researcher. And I hope I am not that pessimistic. I want not to be pessimistic about it. I think that in a way, yeah, documentation could modify the movement of ideas, not the movement per se, and the way that performances are going to express. I don't know. But I was thinking now that in the dance history, we had hard times also that modified the way of expression. So maybe this is a new provocation that we have to deal, but I think it will be still alive, no? Because let's say life is live and performance is live, and maybe it will be in a different way, and this period will be part of its history. these constraints that we are dealing with today.
Thank you. Rok, do you want to answer?
I don't know. You know, for example, I have one example from the 1920s when the western part of Slovenia, which was under fascist Italy at the time, basically the authorities prohibited any kind of dense social gatherings because with the argument of a tuberculosis epidemic, and of course they were kind of basically they used a certain kind of health issue for introducing their authoritative measures, and of course they didn't succeed. Now I don't think that I'm sure that basically some kind of format, some kind of work is going to be possible, no matter how long this current situation lasts. But I don't think that. I mean, this is my personal opinion. Of course, it usually reduces the amount of, for example, production gatherings or possibilities, but it never stops. It can never stop really. The other question is how different basically contexts are going to deal with people with the paid work for live arts in this situation. This is another thing. I don't know. I don't have an ultimate answer for this.
My question actually it is because of this situation, is actually archiving is going after the performance. Is it possible to happen the opposite, that archiving to go first, like to predict the art, like to be the first impulse, not to be the second one, can be the first one?
Yeah, I mean, you remember really that we had an interview and I asked you, like, look in 10, 20 years from now, how people will look at your production now. And maybe the way of documenting now, it raises this awareness that somebody will look at this period and will see how we struggle to deal with this, and this modifies our way that we perform now. I mean, for instance, during the lockdown, there were dance, everybody in his own place, and I mean, we tried to stay alive, and this was documented. It was this need to share with the others, so through archiving. Archiving as a documentation process, so I can think that in this way. I don't know.
Gale Borisova wants to comment.
I'm also very curious if the internet and the global networking is having a problem for one day, but let's suppose that it's possible for a long period. What we are doing with all digitalized information, and do you have as an archivist a special trick to predict this? Because I think the question of Vili, I would answer that some artists are already working for the future. Because now with this COVID situation, we all are yelling, probably not all, but some, and having a fun with this, and it's also taking it serious, and it's very important. But it's a new situation, and I'm sure that the time doesn't go backwards, go forward. So it will very fast having the changes now with the new technology are possible to happen very fast. So we even don't have time to, since the COVID, I'm addicted of internet, and I found new channels and new information and so nice things. Especially I escaped from my profession because it's much more interesting to me, and I hope also the other people, to look at the things we miss because we didn't have time. I hope internet will stop for a certain time, and we will have time just to, to probably to archive ourselves, because each of us has archive at home. Here in Bulgaria, I know many people there having their own archive. The problem is who will be the owner of the everyone to get, and do we need to have one place only, like one server in desert in California?
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely for in this time, the artists, I think they were more aware of this need of having their own archive arranged in a way. So, and raised also the awareness of the need to document now what they are doing. So it is a reflective movement. This has a reflective dimension into it. I think. It is more and more important to have this documentation about the work. And now, I mean, also talking now to the artists, I think they are more interested in organizing what they did before, and to try to bring all these materials and reflect on them as we reflect now on the documents from the 20s and the 30s. And yeah, you know, in a way, and for the second reflection that you mentioned, when I received these donations from different places, and I also asked myself, okay, these are private archives, now they are coming here and they are disconnected from their creator. And they're now in one place and they are being digitized, and, you know, they enter a new life that, and in this process you lose something, yeah? So we had this program with the scanning of the archive, and what do you gain, what do you lose? That you gain accessibility, that you put it online, that it goes to a server, and it has a wider access if technology allows it. But other than that, we have the documents. Here we have the documents and the story of the one who that produced it, and I think this is very important as well. And you try to keep the balance into digitizing and the caring for the documents.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. We're really out of time already. Thank you, Corina, Rock, for your heartful participation. Unfortunately, Sasha had to leave a little bit earlier because of change in the program that we made, and he couldn't reschedule his arrangements. Thank you all our online viewers. Thank you for the people present here physically, and we would like to invite you to the performance tonight at 7 o'clock in Sofia, Goldberg Variations, an interpretation by the Slovenian dancer Juri Konjar of the iconic piece by Steve Paxton. So for the ones who are in Sofia, hopefully we see each other at DNK space, and have a good Saturday. Thank you very much again to Corina and Rob.
My greetings to everybody in Sofia. Bye.
Bye. Bye.